Hey, FanboyNation.
This is your pal Daffy Duck, and you're watching.
You're watching.
We're watching. You're watching Fanboy.
Fanboy. Fanboy.
Fanboy.
Fanboy.
A fanboy, etc.
FanboyNation.
Dot. I assume Tom.
Very rarely do I get to talk to somebody as fun as this gentleman that's very open to discuss what's going on with the world today, whether it's his own work or just life in general. Jordan Belfi, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
You know, it's very easy in the beginning because you were asking if we're going to use the video or if we're going to use the audio, and you're just so comfortable with either one of them rather than, you know, I've interviewed some people in the past that are like got very rigid before we even hit record on how we were going to go. So thank you for being so open to, you know, letting it flow.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Well, we know you from All American, and now we are going to be talking about Nefarious, which is based on a book, but it comes out on Good Friday.
Yeah.
Fill us in how we get a horror, psychological, supernatural thriller coming out on one of the holiest days in all of Christendom.
Well, the crux of this movie really deals with spiritual matters and religious matters and matters of faith. It really underlines the whole theme of the movie and the plot of the movie, to be honest. I mean, the setup of the movie is that there's a serial killer who's stated to be executed, and the night of his execution, they bring in a psychiatrist for one final evaluation to determine whether he's sane or insane. You know, whether he's sane enough to stand execution. That's who I play. This doctor named Dr. James Martin. And it's really about that meeting and that confrontation. He claims that he's a demon. He claims that he's possessed. And so I'm tasked with the task of determining whether he's faking it or he's insane. And that's going to determine whether or not he's executed. But it delves into all kinds of matters of faith and what the nature of evil is when you're sitting down face to face with it. Is this person insane or insane? Or is there a third option? Is he telling the truth? So yeah.
You know, the problem with that is the gentleman playing the supposed demon or the possessed criminal is Patrick Flannery, who is so good that you're not sure if he really is possessed or not.
Yeah, Sean's performance is phenomenal. And in a movie like this, which really centers just around these two men, it's a real back and forth. And the power and the drama and the intensity of what he and I go through together and how we bounce things back and forth. People are responding. I mean, it's masterfully written, but it's not only entertaining and takes you on a ride, but it is deeply meaningful. It's a significant exploration of meaningful, important ideas. And it makes you question a lot about what the nature of evil is and whether or not you're picking a side, because ultimately we all have to pick a side between good and bad.
You know, it seems that that's what we're facing these days, especially in society as a whole.
Yeah.
There was a photo that came out, and I'm not going to get into the politics aspect of it,
Yeah.
but in New York, when the former president was indicted, and there was his supporters on one side, the detractors on the other, and this makeshift aisleway with the police patrolling it to try to make sure everybody's safe, you know, whether you oppose him or you're for him. And it was just this interesting divide that caused this pathway that someone needs to patrol it in order to keep everyone as comfortable as possible, which was kind of frightening of itself when you get down to the crux of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's we see it everywhere around us, and sorry that the that's the nature of pets. I don't know if you can hear that, but yeah, I mean, there is a divide, and you know, this movie, the reason I was so excited to talk to you about it is because all of those issues are explored. I mean, I don't know whether horror movie is even an appropriate title, but it's a horror movie in the sense of it's frightening when you actually have to confront it face to face. And so for that, I think people are really going to be compelled and moved. You know, you always want to say things are, you know, entertaining and are going to be a thrill ride, but this film is deeper than that, and there's something about it that burrows its way into your mind. There's actually a moment in the movie that still to this day, and I'm playing the role, that haunts me, that gives me chills. And I think the movie earns that moment. I'm assuming you've seen the movie. I don't know whether you've seen the film or not.
Yeah, I just don't want to give too much away.
Got it. But there is a moment when I, you know, that you know, towards the end of the film that I couldn't shake, and I played it. And so, yeah, that's why I think the film is so compelling.
You know, in the 70s, we had this resurgence of film as art, and not just to make this quick cash in on the big budget, whether it was the musicals of the 50s or the superhero genre, which I loved. You know, I mean, come on, FanboyNation is the name of it. But,
Absolutely.
you know, it's almost become like it ebbs and flows between disposable content and stuff that makes you think. You know, Rocky gave us that emotional ride, The Godfather, Bonnie and Clyde, where we have all these gray areas, and we've kind of lost that in this generation of filmmaking, but it's coming back more so on the independent scene the way it did in the 90s and the early 2000s, and now the flow is back to wanting storytelling and not disposable content. When it has something like this that's so powerful on spirituality, psychology, depravity of the human condition, you're going to allow us to have a conversation about film, which we really haven't had the moral discussions in such a long time. Was that really important when you read the script and said, okay, now we're going to open up dialogue with this?
100%. On multiple levels. Number one, as an actor, you're always, you know, in the most basic way, looking not only to tell interesting stories, but you're looking for roles that are rich and complex and give you the opportunity to sink your teeth in, just on that basic level. And those kinds of roles don't come around every day. And then beyond that, yes, the questions and wrestling with questions of morality and good and evil and the true nature of good and evil. Yeah, I mean, it explores stuff that's significant. So yes, I'm all for all kinds of entertainment and movies, but you're right. This film gets back to being a real movie in the sense of letting the actors act, getting out of the way in a certain way, and exploring issues that are of significance. Yeah, I think that this, and that's there's a simplicity to it, and there's a power in that simplicity, because it's not going to rely on spectacle or people, you know, traditional cliche images of demons or people, you know, puking up substances or, you know, or those or jump scares in that way. It's a deeper horror. It's a deeper psychological, terrifying thing to face.
You know, when it's primarily the two of you that are on camera together, and I don't know how the shots were set up, if it was two cameras filming you at the same time as you're interacting, does it almost feel like theater, you know, RE instead of ER, where it's a stage performance and it's the mutual interaction going back and forth, rather than on film or digital where there's the pauses and the cuts and, you know, the retakes? Because at some points it feels that the flow is just a natural element rather than, you know, you notice where the edits are going to be made.
I think people, I mean, I don't want to claim to know everybody's desires, but I feel people are craving that. There's been such a lack of that, and yeah, in that sense, there's a realism to the movie, because you're there and there's you're with the actors, you're with the performances, and there's a seamlessness to it that I think is rare. And as an actor, that's what you live for. But yeah, it was an interesting process because so much of it is just the two of us. Um, we had to really go there with each other, and that volleying back and forth. Um, we didn't have a ton of rehearsal, but Sean and I had an incredible chemistry, and we just clicked, and we knew that we could trust one another, and really go there with each other. And so everything in terms of crafting it, is about that kind of trust. And I'm so grateful that I had in a partner, Sean, who was bringing what he was bringing, which elicits everything out of me, and vice versa.
Whenever you make a film like this, you learn something new about yourself because you have to delve into these emotional aspects that your character deals with. It's
Yeah.
not just, I'm playing a part, turn it on, turn it off. It actually becomes a part of you, or some of you comes out that you weren't necessarily ready to explore. What was something you learned about yourself in making the film?
Um, well, I think the idea, well, I'll tell you a personal story, which is my first child, my firstborn son, was born on day one of shooting this movie. I was there in Oklahoma City. I live in LA. And so I was 2,000 miles away, or however many miles that is, when my wife went into labor and then had our baby. Um, the experience of so I became a father during the course of shooting this movie. Everything about your perspective on life and who you are, you're changed after that. And so consciously or unconsciously, I think that informed my performance. There are issues in the movie that relate directly to that. So it served that. I think at the end of the day, so that changed me immensely. And I think at the end of the day, all you have in life is the truth. It's all you have to establish some sort of solid foundation underneath you. And if you're lying or lying to yourself, um, you'll have to confront it. And I think that's actually at the heart of James, my character's journey in this, is that he's faced to confront lies I think he's been telling himself. And when you're confronted with no way out of those lies, there's a reckoning. And I think this is the story of his reckoning in that way. But I think it's about truth and having to face it and not being able to escape that. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It does, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know if your PR team had mentioned to you that my background is in theology. I have an advanced degree in theology as well.
I had no idea, and that makes this conversation all the more incredible.
Because one thing that we always lack is that people sit there and say, "Oh, I'll see evil coming a mile away," but they expect it to be this big, thunderous rumbling. And what people don't understand, especially in dealing with demonology or the devil himself, is that evil slowly encroaches, and
Yeah.
it's minimal. It's like, "Oh, that's not so bad. That's not so bad. I could deal with that." And it slowly gets to the point that it comes to the point of return, because or no return, where you sat there and said, "How did we get here?" Well, you
Correct.
missed all the early steps because you let it go further than it should have, because you were tolerant of certain things that you shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
Do you see that in the evolution of your character, where he, as you've mentioned, he's lied to himself to convince himself of certain things, and now he's face to face with this demonic entity that he's not sure where it's really going to go for him?
I think that's dead on. Um, he's a psychiatrist. He's a doctor. He's a smart man. I think he thinks he's figured it all out. He's got the answers. He's a rational thinking man, and in terms of how he defines rationality, and so he can outwit this whatever's in front of him. Right? He's smarter. He's got all the answers. And I think during the course of this, I think a lot of people fall into that category in life. We think we have all the answers, and then you know, having an experience where we're humbled by the idea that we don't have all the answers, or we might not know everything, is a very universal theme. But you're right. I think that was one of the things I took away too about the nature of evil, is that it's we use these words, diabolical, nefarious. I mean, nefarious is the name of that character, but it's because of its diabolical creep. It's a slow creep, and he explains that in the movie. You just keep moving the goalpost and moving the goalpost and moving the goalpost, and then before you know it, it's the frog boiling in the water, right? You don't realize it, and all of a sudden, it's over. And I think that's a big part of the realization of James and of the movie in general, which is, yes, that you chip away. What the demon talks about with taking over this this guy, Edward Wayne Brady, is that it was a slow process, and before you know it, we had them all, and that's his idea of taking over society. So I think you're dead on, and I'm sure you could speak to it in theological terms a lot better than I can, but I think you understand the heart of it.
And now, as a father, there's some stuff that you would have tolerated as a single man. There's some stuff that you would no longer tolerate as a married man. And then there are certain things that you wouldn't even fathom becoming a parent that you would have tolerated all the way back to being single. Have you noticed that about yourself after playing this character?
Yeah, I noticed that. I think that's part of maturing. I think it's really, I mean, that's part of growing up and maturing, and having a less narcissistic view of the world. That certainly when you are accountable to a significant other, a spouse in my case, and then to a child, it's not about you. And I think that's also one of my takeaways from the experience of the movie, is that I feel like I'm humble enough to know that I don't have all the answers, and that I need to serve my wife, and I need to serve my child, and take care and protect them the best that I can. But letting go of that narcissism and that sort of self navel gazing impulse is an important thing to grow into. So that's been a huge takeaway for me, for whatever that's worth.
Sean's character in this also reflects the egotism of modern society, in that no one is willing to listen. We're only waiting for our turn to talk. And it's my perspective, and I'm right, and I don't care what you have to say. And if you slightly deviate, 2 degrees left or right of what I've said, we can no longer associate with each other.
Yeah.
And that's very demonic in a sense, not only from the theological standpoint, but what we see in the film and how his character is slowly revealed to us. How do we get away from that and just become willing to listen again?
I mean, that is the question of all questions of the moment. If I had the answer to that, I'm sure I could solve a lot of the ills that we're experiencing. I wouldn't begin to understand. I wouldn't begin to claim that I know the answer to that question. But I do think it revolves around. I do think it revolves around the idea of listening, and of not claiming to know that you have all the answers. I know that much, and I know that we have to accept reality and truth on its own terms. I think what we're seeing a lot of, and this is what he does in the movie, which is, my character does a lot in the movie, is that he starts changing the language that he's using to sort of justify his actions. He changes the terms, he changes the language in order to, I think, rationalize his behavior. And that's part of what I consider the sort of lying to himself and not confronting the reality. And this entity makes him confront truths that he wittingly or unwittingly didn't want to face. But I don't have the answer to your big question. Do you? What's your thought?
The only thing I can think of is the stop othering our opponent and making them the other.
Yeah.
and humanize them, and that's where the respect will begin to occur, whether we disagree or not. But we could actually have a dialogue instead of you're the other, you're this other, this completely different entity. You know, like if we go back to World War II and how the artwork showed everyone on the opposition as, you know, monsters or demons or whatever else, instead of humanizing the opponent. Yes, there obviously there were major atrocities. I'm not going to ever downplay anything that happened in World War II, let's be honest. But to justify how cruel we were to each other in that regard is that we othered everyone, you know, and demonized them because they weren't just like us. And I kind of see people being like that today. And if we can get past the other aspect and and return to the humanity aspect of it, then I think the real respect and the open dialogue can happen.
It's easy to give into the darkness. It's an easy thing to do, and it's always, and I think in a lot of ways the allegory of this film is that it's easy to give into anger or whatever that evil is. It's there beckoning you, and you have to but you have to invite it in, and you have a choice to not invite it in or to invite it in. It's the same in stories of vampires and vampiric possession. You know, you have to invite the vampire through the window, and like it's and in a sense you have a choice. You know, you have that free will to invite it in or to not, and that's actually a big part of the movie, about inviting the evil in or not. And that's the choice you have. That's the choice I think we all ultimately have, to give into that or not. And it's an easy, seductive thing to want to give into. The harder choice is to be the light. And so I think that's a big part of the solution as well to the issues that you're bringing.
You know, with this film and the shadowing and the lighting, there's still the dark and the light that's going on, and the struggle between the two.
Yeah.
Not just conversationally, not just spiritually, but also visually. Why is the darkness so appealing in this regard? You know, is it because we can hide in the darkness and we can, you know, shy away from everything? Or is this fear of everything will be revealed in the light and see me as I am?
Why is it so seductive? Is because it allows you to do whatever your impulses are. You know, whatever your sort of selfish, narcissistic impulses are. It's like I said, it's easy to give into anger or anything like that. That's easy. I mean, it's easy to be to just do what you want whenever you want and have no responsibilities and no accountability. The harder thing to do is to have the discipline and to be responsible and be accountable to others and have to put others' needs maybe before your wants, not their wants above your needs, but their needs above your wants. And so, giving into those hedonistic impulses is easy. Who wouldn't want to do that? The harder thing to do is to know what's right and what's the good thing to do. And so that's why it's so easy to it's always there. It's always, we have all these metaphors, the devil on your shoulder, and, you hear that, right? It's really easy to give into that. So yeah, I mean, that's the choice we have, do we let that in or not?
From day one of filming, when you started and your child was born that day,
yeah,
to seeing the final cut of the film, what is your experience like on stepping onto the set to seeing the final product? Because it's two totally different worlds. It's
Sure.
not like you shoot this thing chronologically.
Well, to be honest with you, this is one of the extremely rare cases where we did. And thank goodness for that, because it's the kind of piece that you really can't shoot out of order, because so much of it centers on this conversation. But I don't know, it feels like a lifetime ago and yesterday simultaneously. it was a beautiful, magical thing that my son was born on day one. It felt bigger than me, and it will be always intertwined for me personally with this movie. But yeah, I mean, I went to bed the night before day one with my wife in labor, and I woke up and I went through hair and makeup, and I got to my room, and I was getting into wardrobe, and I got the text that he was born. I'm FaceTiming there, and I see my son, and he's 90 seconds old, and he's on my wife's chest. He's an alien, but he's also part of me. And then I heard, knock, knock, we're ready, Jordan. And I had to hang up and walk and start this journey. So now he's like walking around and calling me dad and stuff. And so it's out of body in that way. But to see the final product, you know, I knew that we were doing something special. But when you see a movie, we had the premiere just the other night. I just got back to LA from the premiere. When you see the movie complete and in the ultimate test, which is with an audience, they're either compelled or they're not. You know, people are either, it's the ultimate test. And man, the energy was incredible. It was incredible. People were riveted and people were provoked and inspired and moved and scared. It was really, really satisfying because yes, you know, it's a piece of art, but and it's also an entertaining piece of art, but at the end of the day, you let it go and it's with the audience and they're either going to respond or they're not. And it was a blast.
You know, there's always something that happens in film, and you know, since everything's shot digitally, no one's too familiar with it this generation, but the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
You take the old strip and it ends up getting cut and it's no longer a part of the film. Was there a moment in the film that was so impactful that just didn't make the final cut that you guys were filming early on, or at least halfway through?
It's a good question. And to be honest with you, I don't know that there is. I don't know that anything really was lost. There might have been a sequence where I was walking down the prison corridor, you know, back to, I mean, minuscule things that have no bearing and aren't there now for a reason. But no, it's really all there. Carrie and Chuck's script was so precise. Their language, I mean, they are extremely knowledgeable theologically in a religious capacity. The way they have crafted the dialogue is incredibly precise, masterful, dramatic, and it's, you know, people use. I read someone say, you know, that this isn't just a psychological thriller; it's an intellectual thriller. It's sort of a thinking man's movie simultaneously, and I think that's right. And I think a lot of that has to do with the way it's crafted. And people can't believe that so much of it is just these two men in a room. But no, almost all of it, as far as I can tell, is there, and it's such a joy to see it come together.
Jordan, was there a line that struck you to the core, whether yours or Sean's, that you're like, oh, this is something that like is never going to leave me?
Well, I don't know if it's a line, but as I referenced before, and I don't want to give anything away, that's the tough part. But the concept of what happens to me, to my character at the end, it really paid off for me, and it really brought everything. I don't know. Like I said before, I couldn't sort of shake the idea of it. And I find it so actually terrifying, actually horrifying, that it brings somebody, you know, at the start of the movie, he's an atheist, admittedly so. He for all the reasons I explained before, and I think, you know, by the end, he doesn't have some giant conversion. This isn't that kind of thing. He's humbled enough to go, maybe I don't know. I experienced something. I saw something. I had this experience that makes me go, I don't know. I don't know. And I think that's most people. I really do. So so not necessarily a specific line, but the concept of what happens to James at the end of the movie is something that really stuck with me and brought all that the movie's about into focus for me.
Well, I think the more often we say we don't know, the more willing we are to learn about something new.
I think that's right. I think that's exactly right.
Jordan, it has been a great pleasure speaking with you today. Congratulations on the film Nefarious, out April 14th. Where can we find you on social media if we want to connect with you?
Instagram at Jordan Belfi, JordanBelfi, and Twitter as well, which is Jordan C Belfi. But I'm on Instagram the most.
Cool, because I figured you didn't want to argue politics 24 hours a day on Twitter.
It's true. It's always also Twitter is always, and maybe I'm on the outside, but it's always sort of looked like the Matrix to me. And people's ability to read through the Twitter thing is phenomenal. But yeah, Instagram is where I am mostly, and I'd definitely love to chat with anybody there.
Jordan Belfi, thank you so much for your time today. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.